It's a funny thing. Clarity. You don't realize you've lost it until it starts to come back. For me, it wasn't a sunrise, but more like the slow burn of a low-wattage bulb finally reaching full power. For the last 3 months, my world had been wrapped in a thick, gray fog. Not the kind that rolls in from the sea, cool and damp, but a dry, suffocating haze that lived right behind my eyes. I'm Ira. I'm 78 years old, and up until a week ago I was pretty sure I was losing my mind. The days had a syrupy quality to them, slow and indistinct. I'd find myself standing in the middle of the kitchen, the refrigerator door hanging open, with no memory of what I'd come for. Dizziness would sweep over me at the worst times, usually when I was trying to stand up, my head swimming as if I were on a boat in a rough sea. My strength, the reliable, sturdy strength of a man who'd worked with his hands his whole life, had evaporated. I felt frail, brittle, a ghost in my own home. My son Mark and his wife Susan had a simple, clean explanation for it all. Age. It was just my age catching up with me, they'd say, their voices dripping with a kind of pity that felt more like impatience. Dad's just getting on, you know. He's almost 80. What can you expect? They'd exchange those looks, the quick, knowing glances that you're not supposed to see but always do. It was the look of two people confirming a shared secret opinion. He's slipping. It's time. Time for what? They never said directly to me, but I heard them. The walls in this old house are solid oak, but sound travels. I heard them in the kitchen while I was supposedly napping in my armchair. Power of attorney. That was the phrase that cut through the fog like a lighthouse beam. It wasn't a question of if, but when. They'd already called a doctor, a specialist in geriatrics they'd found, to schedule an assessment. My assessment. They spoke about my mind as if it were a leaky faucet they needed a professional to come and fix, or more likely, condemn. But here's the thing about being old. You might get slower. You might forget a name here and there, but you develop a finely tuned instrument for detecting nonsense. And this, all of this, felt like nonsense. I'd known men in their 90s who were sharper than I was feeling. My own father had been doing his own taxes until the day he died at 89. This fog, this weakness, it didn't feel like a natural decline. It felt artificial. It felt like something was being done to me. The suspicion started as a tiny flickering ember in the back of my clouded mind. It was a dangerous thought, a treacherous one, to suspect your own son, your only child, of something so monstrous. It's not a conclusion you arrive at lightly, but the ember wouldn't go out. It smoldered, fed by every condescending pat on my shoulder from Mark, every saccharine sweet, "Oh, Ira, let me get that for you," from Susan. The turning point came with my medication, my heart pills. I've been on the same low-dose beta blocker for 10 years. It was as much a part of my morning routine as brushing my teeth. But lately, about an hour after I took my pill, the fog would roll in thickest. The world would go soft at the edges, and the urge to just sink into my chair and drift away would become overwhelming. This was the detail that didn't fit their narrative of simple aging. The symptoms were on a schedule. They punched in and out like factory workers. So I took a risk. I called my pharmacist, Leo. Leo's not just a pharmacist. He's a friend. We've known each other for 30 years. We used to be in the same bowling league, back when my knees could handle it. I trusted him. I told him my suspicion, my voice raspy and low over the phone, feeling like a conspirator in my own life. I expected him to be gentle, to tell me I was confused, to maybe suggest I talk to my doctor. He didn't. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then he just said, "Bring them in, Ira. Don't tell anyone. Just bring me the bottle." That was 2 weeks ago. The day I handed that bottle over to Leo felt like stepping off a cliff. He had a contact at a private lab, a friend of his brother's. It would cost me, but my late wife Martha and I had been careful savers. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable. I had enough put away to pay for the truth. For the last week, on Leo's instruction, I've been a performer. He gave me a bottle of identical-looking placebos, tiny sugar pills. Every morning, I'd make a show of taking my medication in front of Mark or Susan, and then I'd act. I would amplify the dizziness. I'd pretend to lose my train of thought mid-sentence. I'd ask the same question 3 times in an hour. I played the part of the fading old man they so desperately wanted me to be, and oh, how they soaked it up. Their sympathy became thicker, their glances more frequent. The whispers about power of attorney turned into open conversations about finding a nice, quiet care facility. For my own good, of course. Yesterday Leo called. The lab results were back. My heart medication, the pills my son and daughter-in-law had been so diligently refilling for me, were packed with a powerful sedative. Not a trace of the beta blocker I was prescribed, just a chemical cosh, designed to keep me docile, confused, and weak, designed to make me look incompetent. The tampered pills, carefully sealed in an evidence bag, are now at the police lab. An official investigation has been opened. And me? The fog is gone. It lifted so completely, it feels like I've walked out of a stuffy room into the crisp autumn air. I am awake. I am clear. And I am feeling stronger and angrier than I have in a very, very long time. This morning, Mark and Susan told me their lawyer, Mr. Fields, was coming over at 2 o'clock to discuss my future arrangements, to finally get the papers signed. They think they're walking into a final victory. They have no idea they're walking into an ambush, and I'm sitting here in my armchair, feeling the solidness of the floor beneath my feet, just waiting for the sound of their car in the driveway. It wasn't about revenge when this started. It was about survival. But now it feels a whole lot like revenge. The weight of their betrayal was a physical thing. In the days after I gave Leo the pills, while I waited for the lab results, I felt it pressing down on my chest, a phantom weight heavier than any grief I'd ever known. Even losing Martha 5 years ago, a loss that had hollowed me out completely, was a clean pain. It was the pain of absence, of a life beautifully lived coming to its natural end. This was a dirty pain, a sticky, venomous thing that clung to everything. I found myself wandering through the house we built together, running my hand along the cool, smooth surface of the granite countertop she'd picked out, staring at the faint pencil marks on the doorframe in the hall where we'd tracked Mark's height as a boy. Every memory was now tainted, viewed through a new, sickening filter. I remembered Mark as a child, a whirlwind of skinned knees and boundless energy. Martha and we poured everything we had into him. I was a civil engineer. I worked long hours, but I never missed a baseball game. I taught him how to ride a bike on this very street, my hand steady on the back of the seat, until he shouted, "I got it, Dad. Let go." And I did. I let go and watched him pedal away, wobbly but free, a lump of pride so big in my throat I could barely breathe. Where did that boy go? When did he become this stranger who could look me in the eye while slowly poisoning me? The answer, I'm ashamed to admit, was Susan. They met in college. Mark was smitten from day one, completely starstruck by her ambition, her sharp edges. Martha had seen it. She had a sixth sense for people. She never said anything overtly critical. That wasn't her way. But she'd get a quiet look on her face after they'd visit. She'd say things like, "She's very driven, isn't she?" Or, "I hope Mark doesn't lose himself trying to keep up with her." It was the closest she ever came to a warning. I, in my foolishness, had dismissed it. I saw a bright, capable young woman who loved my son. I thought she was good for him, that she'd push him. I just never imagined she'd push him to this. The pattern of disrespect was a slow burn, almost unnoticeable at first. It began with little things. They'd forget to invite me to a dinner with her parents. They'd make plans for the holidays and inform me at the last minute, assuming I had nothing else to do. After Martha passed, it escalated. My home, the one I'd shared with my wife for 40 years, became their weekend getaway spot. They'd arrive on a Friday night, Susan striding in like she owned the place, pointing out all the things that were dated. "Oh, Ira, this wallpaper is just a tragedy," she'd say with a tinkling laugh, as if it were a joke. "We should really get someone in to update this place. It would improve the resale value enormously." Resale value. I was still living here, and she was already thinking about selling it. Mark would just stand there, shifting his weight from foot to foot, giving a weak, apologetic smile. He wouldn't defend me. He wouldn't defend his mother's memory. He'd just mumble, "Now, honey, we can talk about that later." But they never did. The comments just kept coming. Little chipping away remarks that made me feel like a tenant in my own life. My one anchor, my reason for enduring it all, was my granddaughter, Lily. She's 10. She has Martha's eyes and my stubborn chin. She's bright and funny, and she loves my stories about the old days. When they would visit, I would focus on her. We'd build elaborate structures with my old Lego set in the basement, or I'd teach her the names of the birds that came to the feeder in the backyard. For those hours, I could almost forget the simmering resentment I felt towards her parents. I put up with their condescension, their thinly veiled greed, because I was terrified they'd use Lily as a weapon. If I pushed back, if I caused a scene, they would cut me off. They would stop bringing her to visit. The thought of not seeing her, of not watching her grow, was a terror far greater than their insults. And so I became the placid, agreeable old man. I endured it all for the handful of precious hours I'd get with my granddaughter. That was my justification. That was the reason I let it go on for so long. It was a form of cowardice. I see that now. I was buying my access to her with my own dignity. The true catalyst, the moment the smoldering ember of suspicion roared into a fire, happened about a month ago. It was a Saturday. They'd come for the weekend, and I was feeling particularly foggy. I had taken my pill that morning, and the world was swimming. I was in my armchair pretending to doze, the newspaper limp in my lap. They thought I was asleep. They were in the kitchen, their voices low, but the air was still, and their words carried. "He almost fell again this morning," Mark said, his voice a mixture of worry and frustration. I saw Susan's voice was sharp, clinical. "That's why we need to move on this, Mark. The doctor's appointment is on the books, but the lawyer said having a clear pattern of decline documented will make the power of attorney go through without a hitch. No judge will question it if he's clearly a danger to himself." A beat of silence. Then Mark, his voice softer, more hesitant. "I don't know, Suze. It feels wrong. He's my dad." Susan's sigh was a masterpiece of condescension. "Mark, be realistic. This isn't about him being your dad anymore. This is about asset management. This house alone is worth a fortune. His pension, his investments. We can't let him just fumble it all away into some scam or make a bad decision because he's not all there. It's our inheritance. It's Lily's future. Are you going to let your sentimentality jeopardize Lily's future?" The way she said it, asset management. It wasn't about my well-being. It wasn't about my safety. It was a business transaction. I was no longer a person. I was a collection of assets that needed to be managed. And the masterstroke, the cruel genius of it, was using their own daughter, my beautiful Lily, as the justification for their greed. My heart, my supposedly weak heart, felt like it was being squeezed in a vise. I didn't move a muscle. I kept my breathing even. My eyes closed. But in that moment, the fight began. The old Ira, the quiet, accommodating man, died in that armchair. A new one was born, one forged in cold, silent rage. He knew he was in a war, and he knew he was utterly alone. He needed an ally. And that's when the name Leo floated up through the fog. The decision to call Leo was an act of rebellion. Picking up the phone felt like lifting 100-pound weight. My hands were trembling, not from the sedatives, but from a potent cocktail of fear and adrenaline. I was about to cross a line. I was about to accuse my own son. But Susan's words, asset management, echoed in my head, drowning out any lingering sense of family loyalty. My relationship with Mark and Susan was already a lie. It was time to stop pretending. Leo's Pharmacy, Miller's Drugs, is a relic from another time. It has a real wooden counter worn smooth by decades of customers, and it smells of old paper and that clean, slightly antiseptic scent of medicine. Leo took over the shop from his father, just as I had hoped Mark would one day take over my small engineering consulting firm before he decided it wasn't dynamic enough for him and went into marketing. Leo understood legacy. He understood the work of a lifetime. When I walked in, the little bell over the door chimed. Leo was behind the counter, counting out pills. He's a big man, built like a retired linebacker, with a kind, weary face and glasses perched on the end of his nose. He saw me, and his professional smile faltered, replaced by a look of genuine concern. "Ira," he said, his voice low. "You look like you've seen a ghost. Worse," I mumbled, my eyes darting around the empty store. "I think I'm seeing two of them, and they live in my son's house." He led me to the back, into the small, cluttered office filled with invoices and pharmaceutical manuals. I sat in a rickety chair while he leaned against a metal filing cabinet, his arms crossed. I told him everything. I told him about the fog, the dizziness, the scheduled weakness. I told him about the whispers, the power of attorney, the phrase asset management. I felt foolish saying it out loud, like a character in a cheap melodrama. But as I spoke, I saw the look on Leo's face change from concern to a hard, grim understanding. When I finished, he was silent for a long moment, just looking at me. "My old man," he finally said, his voice thick. "My dad. Towards the end, my sister tried something similar. Not drugs. Money. She got him to sign some papers when he was sick with pneumonia. Told him they were for his insurance. It was a quitclaim deed to his house. I found out by accident when a tax bill showed up in her name." He shook his head, a flicker of old anger in his eyes. "I fought her. Took her to court. It was ugly, Ira. Cost a fortune. Tore what was left of the family apart. But I won. I got him his house back. People do things for money you wouldn't think were possible. Especially family." Hearing his story, that raw, painful confession, was like a key turning in a lock. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't paranoid. This was a real thing that happened in the world. Leo's empathy wasn't pity. It was recognition. He saw his own father's story in my trembling hands. This was the subplot I hadn't known I was stepping into, the shared history of filial betrayal that made him my perfect, and only, ally. "Okay," he said, his tone shifting from reflective to practical. "Here's what we do. You're right to be suspicious of the pills. Getting them tested is the first step, but we have to do it right. We can't just send them to any lab." He started scribbling on a notepad. "There's a place that does forensic toxicology. They're expensive, but they maintain a strict chain of custody. Their findings are admissible in court. Should it come to that, you'll need to pay in cash. No paper trail leading back to you." He then explained the next part of the plan, the part that would require me to become an actor. "While we wait, you can't let them know you suspect anything. In fact, you have to get worse. You have to be the confused old man they think you are. It will make them overconfident. It will make them careless." He went to a shelf and pulled down a stock bottle. "I'll make you up a batch of placebo. They'll look identical to your beta blockers. Same size, same color. You take these instead. Every morning, and Ira," he leaned forward, his eyes locking onto mine, "you give the performance of your life." The next few days were a masterclass in deception. I had to separate the real pills for the lab sample without Mark and Susan noticing. I waited until they went out for dinner one evening. My hands shook as I counted out a dozen of the small white pills from the bottle they kept on the kitchen counter, placing them into a small plastic baggie. Leo had given me. I labeled it with the date and time, just as he'd instructed. My engineering mind, the part of me that loved precision and order, took over. I was collecting data. I was building a case. I then carefully hid the baggie in my old toolbox in the garage, tucked away inside a dusty manual for a table saw I hadn't used in years. No one would look there. Then I began my research. While they thought I was napping, I was on the old desktop computer in my study, the screen brightness turned down low. I typed in power of attorney coercion, elder financial abuse, signs of being drugged. The search results were a horrifying education. I read about legal standards for competency, about the importance of a physician's assessment, and the ways that assessment could be manipulated. I learned that a power of attorney, once signed, would give Mark and Susan almost unlimited control over my life. They could sell my house, drain my bank accounts, and place me in a home against my will. It wasn't just about managing assets, it was about seizing them. The more I read, the colder and harder my resolve became. It wasn't just about my dignity anymore, it was about my freedom. I even made a call. I found the number for a legal aid society that specialized in elder law. I used a prepaid burner phone I'd had Leo pick up for me. I spoke to a young, sharp-sounding lawyer named Miss Alvarez. I didn't give her my real name. I just laid out the hypothetical situation: a son and daughter-in-law, suspicious medication, an impending power of attorney meeting. If your suspicions about the medication are correct, she said, her voice clear, and you have verifiable third-party proof from a certified lab, you are not just dealing with a family dispute. You are the victim of a serious felony. Assault, at the very least, possibly attempted murder, depending on the dosage and intent. Attempted murder. The words hung in the air long after I'd ended the call. It sounded so extreme, so dramatic. But what else do you call it when you systematically drug someone knowing they have a heart condition to steal their life savings? Leo and I had our own secret communication system. I'd take a walk to the end of the block every afternoon at 3. For my health, I'd tell Susan, who would nod with that infuriatingly patronizing smile. Leo would drive by on his way home from the pharmacy. If he had news, he'd tap his horn twice. If not, he'd just wave. For a week, he just waved. My anxiety grew with each passing day. The performance was draining me. Faking the stumble, slurring a word, pretending to forget Lily's name for a moment. That one almost broke me. The look of hurt in her eyes was a physical blow. It was exhausting, but it was working. Mark and Susan were getting bolder. Their conversations about my future were happening in the same room as me now, their voices at a normal volume, assuming I was too far gone to comprehend. They were discussing decorators for the house. They had brochures for assisted living communities spread out on the dining room table. They were picking my future from a glossy catalog, like they were choosing a new sofa. They were so close to the finish line they could taste it, and that made them sloppy. That was the crux of our plan, Leo's plan. Let their greed blind them to the trap being laid right at their feet. The week I spent on the plays was the longest week of my life. It was a strange, inverted reality. On the outside, I was deteriorating at an alarming rate. On the inside, I was coming alive. With each passing day that my system was free of the sedatives, the fog burned away a little more. The colors in the garden seemed brighter. The taste of my coffee was sharper. The words in my newspaper came into focus without a fight. My thoughts, which had been like fish swimming in murky water, were suddenly clear and quick. I had to actively fight the clarity, to remember to stoop my shoulders, to shuffle my feet, to let a vacant look settle on my face. It was the hardest acting I've ever done. My performance was, I have to say, disturbingly convincing. I think a part of me, the part that had been a loving father for 50 years, was channeling the man they were trying to create. I knew what they expected to see, and I gave it to them. One afternoon, Susan was in the kitchen, humming to herself as she scrolled through her phone. I shuffled in, clutching the doorframe. "Susan," I said, letting my voice quaver. I was looking for my reading glasses. She didn't look up from her phone. "They're on your head, Ira." I reached up, my hand fumbling for a moment, before finding them. "Oh, so they are. Silly me." I gave a weak, confused chuckle. She finally looked at me, not with compassion but with a look of profound, weary confirmation. It was the look that said, "See, this is what we're dealing with." "It's okay, Ira," she said, her voice oozing a false sweetness that made my skin crawl. "Why don't you go sit down? I'll bring you a nice cup of tea." A nice cup of tea. It was all I could do, not to laugh in her face. Their confidence grew with every stage stumble. They became less careful, their conversations more brazen. One evening, Mark was on the phone with, I assumed, the lawyer, Mr. Fields. They thought I was asleep in my chair, but my hearing, at least, had always been sharp. "Yeah, the decline has been rapid," Mark said, his voice hushed but audible. "It's worse than we thought. He's mixing things up, forgetting names. Honestly, at this point the signing is just a formality. He's not in any state to manage his own affairs. We're doing him a favor. Really. Doing me a favor." The lie was so complete, he was even telling it to himself. He needed to believe he was the good son, the dutiful son, saving his senile father from himself. It was a more palatable story than the truth, that he was a weak man, a puppet for his greedy wife, robbing his own father blind. Susan was the architect of this whole affair. I was sure of it, but Mark was the willing accomplice. His weakness was not an excuse. It was a betrayal all its own. The panic started on a Thursday. It was small, almost insignificant. I have my pension and my Social Security direct deposited into my main checking account, the one they had their eyes on. But for years I've had a second account at a small local credit union. It was an old habit from my consulting days, a way to keep business and personal funds separate. Every month I had an automatic transfer set up, moving a portion of my pension into that secondary account. It was my project fund, my travel fund, my secret stash. Martha used to call it my mad money. They didn't know about it. I had been careful to keep all the statements, paperless, sent to an email address they didn't know I had. That morning, Susan sat at the dining room table, with her laptop, a stack of my bank statements next to her. She had, I noticed with a cold fury, gone through my desk. "Mark," she called out, her voice tight, with an unfamiliar edge. "Come look at this." Mark came over, peering at the screen. "What is it?" "The pension deposit came in," she said. "But it's short. It's been short by the same amount every month for years. Where is the rest of it going?" "What do you mean? Where is it going?" Mark sounded confused. "It all goes into this account." "No, it doesn't. Look." I could hear her finger tapping on the screen. "There's a recurring transfer, an automatic withdrawal, to an account I don't recognize. He's hiding money from us." Hiding money. The sheer audacity of it almost made me gasp. It was my money, money I had earned over 50 years of hard work, and she spoke of it as if I were an errant employee embezzling company funds. "It's probably nothing," Mark said, ever the conflict avoider. "Maybe an old investment thing he forgot about." "Don't be an idiot, Mark," she snapped, her voice losing its placid facade for the first time. "Nothing about your father is nothing. We need to find out where that money is. We need control of all the accounts before he gives it away to some televangelist." That was their first taste of losing control. It was just a crack in their perfect plan, but it was enough to send a tremor of panic through their little conspiracy. They started watching me more closely, not with concern, but with suspicion. They'd ask me casual questions, trying to trick me into revealing the location of my hidden account. I just played dumber. I'd look at them with a placidly blank expression, or I'd start telling a long, rambling, and completely irrelevant story about my time in the army. Their frustration was a delicious, intoxicating nectar. They were so used to being in charge, to holding all the cards. The idea that this befuddled old man might have a secret, a part of his life they couldn't access, was infuriating to them. They were like spoiled children who had just been told there was one present under the tree they weren't allowed to open. Their greed was making them frantic, and their franticness was making them stupid. The trap was almost ready to spring. They just had to walk into it. The phone call from Leo came on Friday afternoon. I was in the backyard, methodically weeding the rose bushes Martha had planted. It was one of the few things that still felt pure, untouched by their scheming. I had my burner phone in my pocket, and it vibrated silently against my leg. I shuffled back into the house, past Susan, who was on the phone, likely with the bank, trying to trace my missing money. I went into the bathroom and locked the door. "Leo," I whispered. "I got it." "Ira," his voice was grim but steady. "The lab report is in. It's exactly what we thought, only worse. The sedative is a type typically used in hospital settings, a pre-op medication. It's potent. In someone with a heart condition, Ira, they could have killed you." My knees felt weak, and I gripped the edge of the sink. I had known, but hearing it confirmed, hearing the cold, clinical words, stole the air from my lungs. "The original pills, the ones you gave me, are with the police now," Leo continued, his voice all business. "I dropped them off myself, spoke to a Detective Miller. He's opening a file on elder abuse and assault with a deadly weapon. He said the lab report from my contact is good, but they'll run their own tests to confirm for a criminal case. But Ira, the important thing is, you have it. You have the proof. I have the proof. The three most beautiful words in the English language." "What now?" I asked. "Now you wait for them to make their move. They said the lawyer is coming tomorrow. 2 o'clock, I said. "Perfect," Leo said. "Let them walk in. Let them set up their little execution. Then you show them the axe is in your hand, not theirs. And Ira, you don't have to be alone when you do it." That evening I started making my own calls. It was time to shift the power. Not just with evidence, but with people. First I called my niece Sarah. She's my late sister's daughter, a smart, no-nonsense nurse who lives 2 towns over. We hadn't been close in recent years. Mark and Susan had always made a point of subtly excluding her, framing her as a little intense. I now understood why. They didn't like witnesses who couldn't be easily manipulated. I told her everything. Her reaction was a quiet, seething fury. "That witch," she said, her voice tight. "I never trusted Susan. And Mark. God, Uncle Ira, I am so sorry. What do you need?" "I need you here tomorrow," I said. "At 2:30. Just park down the street and wait for my text. I need a friendly face. I need a witness who is also a medical professional." "I'll be there," she said, without a moment's hesitation. Next I called my old business partner, George. We'd run our engineering firm together for 30 years. He was a stickler for details, a man who believed in contracts, evidence, and consequences. I laid out the situation, framing it as a hostile takeover attempt. He whistled long and low. "The little vultures. Ira, I've seen this kind of thing in business, but with your own kid, that's a new level of low." "They have a lawyer coming," I said. "A man named Fields. I'm going to need my own legal counsel in the room." "Consider it done," George said. "I've got a guy on retainer, a real shark. He eats smarmy real estate lawyers like Fields for breakfast. What time should I have him there?" 2 o'clock, I said. "Tell him to come to the front door and say he has an appointment with Ira Peterson. Don't give them time to react." The final piece was Leo. He had started this journey with me, and he was going to be there at the end. He was my moral support, my first ally. He agreed to come, to stand with me. As I went to bed that night, the house was silent. Mark and Susan had gone to bed early, smug and secure in their belief that tomorrow was their coronation day. They had no idea the kingdom was already lost. I felt a profound sense of calm settle over me. For months I had been the one reacting, the one on the defensive. Now I was in control. I had my evidence. I had my allies. I had a plan. This wasn't just about stopping them anymore. This was about dismantling them. The family I had known was a fiction. Tomorrow I would force them to read the final chapter, a chapter I had written myself. They were about to learn that an old man's mind is not a failing asset. It's a library of experience, and my library contained a volume on strategic warfare they never knew existed. The confrontation. It's a word that suggests shouting, chaos, a storm of emotion. But what happened in my living room was something else entirely. It was quiet, precise, and as cold as a surgeon's scalpel. At 1:30, I was sitting in my usual armchair, the one they thought of as my throne of senility. But today, I wasn't slumping. I was sitting upright, my back straight. I wore a freshly pressed shirt and my good trousers. On the coffee table in front of me, instead of a jumble of old magazines, there was a single manila folder. Nothing else. Mark and Susan came downstairs at 1:45, dressed for the occasion. Mark was in a stiff-looking blazer that was too tight in the shoulders, and Susan wore a sharp, navy blue dress. She looked like she was about to close a real estate deal. She was radiating a triumphant energy. "You're looking smart today, Ira," she said, her smile a little too bright. "Mr. Fields will be here any minute. This will all be over soon. Just a few signatures, and you won't have to worry about a thing anymore." "I'm not worried," I said, my voice even and clear. The lack of my usual quaver made her pause for a fraction of a second. She exchanged a quick, almost imperceptible glance with Mark. "Just a good day," the look said. "It doesn't change anything." The doorbell rang at 2:00, sharp. Mark scurried to get it, the eager host. A man in an expensive-looking suit stood on the porch, carrying a slim leather briefcase. "Mr. Fields." He had the slick, overconfident air of a man who rarely lost. "Mr. Peterson," he said, striding into the room and extending a hand to me. I took it. My grip was firm. He seemed momentarily surprised. "A pleasure. I'm Arthur Fields. I'm here to help you and your family streamline your affairs." "Please, have a seat," I said, gesturing to the sofa opposite me. Susan was practically vibrating with anticipation, directing Mark to get everyone water. They were playing the part of concerned, responsible children perfectly. Mr. Fields opened his briefcase on the coffee table, pulling out a thick stack of documents. "Now, Ira," he began, his tone condescendingly gentle, "I know legal documents can be intimidating, but I'll walk you through it. This is a standard durable power of attorney. It simply designates Mark and Susan as your agents to make financial and healthcare decisions on your behalf, should you become unable to do so. Given your recent health challenges, it's a sensible precaution." He slid the top document and a pen across the table toward me. "If you'll just sign right here, right on cue." The doorbell rang again. Susan frowned. "Are we expecting someone else?" "I am," I said. Mark went to the door, a confused look on his face. Standing on the porch was another man in a suit, older and far more imposing than Fields, with a face like a bulldog. "I have an appointment with Mr. Ira Peterson," the man said, his voice a low rumble. He walked past Mark without waiting for an invitation and stood in the center of the room. He looked at Fields, then at me. "Ira, I'm David Chen. George sent me." Mr. Fields' slick smile tightened. "I'm sorry, who are you?" "I'm Mr. Peterson's legal counsel," Chen said, pulling a chair from the dining room and placing it beside my armchair. He sat down and gave me a slight nod. Susan's face was a mask of confusion and fury. "His counsel? Dad, what is this? You don't need a lawyer." "I think I do," I said calmly. "There's one more guest." As if summoned, the doorbell rang a third time. This time, I stood up and walked to the door myself. My steps were steady. Mark and Susan watched me, as if I were a ghost who had suddenly learned to walk through walls. Leo was standing on the porch. Beside him stood a man in a rumpled sport coat who flashed a badge. Detective Miller. "Ira Peterson?" the detective asked. "Yes," I said. "Please, come in." They stepped inside. Leo gave me a solid, reassuring look and went to stand by the fireplace. Detective Miller surveyed the scene, the two lawyers, the stunned son and daughter-in-law, and me, standing at the center of it all. The atmosphere in the room had curdled. Susan's triumphant smile had vanished, replaced by a pale, tight-lipped mask of disbelief. Mark looked like he was about to be physically ill. Mr. Fields was shuffling his papers, his professional composure cracking. "What is going on here?" Susan finally choked out, her voice a high-pitched squeak. "Who are these people?" "This," I said, my voice ringing with a clarity that shocked them all, "is my support team. This is my lawyer, Mr. Chen. This is my friend, Leo. And this is Detective Miller of the City Police Department." I paused, letting the weight of that title settle in the room. "He's here because a serious crime has been committed in this house." I walked back to the coffee table, picked up the manila folder, and opened it. I took out the lab report and placed it on top of Mr. Fields's power of attorney documents. "For the past 3 months," I said, my gaze fixed on Mark and Susan, "I have been feeling dizzy, confused, and weak. You attributed it to my age. You told me I was slipping. You told me I was becoming incompetent." I picked up the report. "This is a toxicology report from a certified forensic lab. It's for the heart medication you've been giving me. It seems my prescription for beta blockers was somehow replaced with a powerful preoperative sedative, a drug designed to incapacitate a person, a drug that when given repeatedly to an elderly man with a heart condition could be fatal." A choked gasp came from Susan. Mark just stared, his face as white as a sheet. "I have been taking placebos for the last week," I continued, my voice cold and hard as steel, "which is why I am feeling, as you can see, perfectly clear. The tampered pills are now in a police evidence locker, and Detective Miller is heading up an investigation into felony assault and elder abuse." Silence. The only sound in the room was the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall, a clock my own father had given me, and Martha as a wedding gift. Mr. Fields, the slick lawyer, was the first to recover. He cleared his throat. "Now, hold on. This is an outrageous and unsubstantiated accusation. It is a lab-certified fact," my lawyer, Chen, cut in, his voice like gravel. "And we have a witness, the pharmacist who provided the placebos, and a police detective who has taken possession of the evidence. I'd advise you to stop talking, Mr. Fields, before you find yourself named as a co-conspirator." Fields' mouth snapped shut. Susan finally found her voice, a torrent of panicked denial. "This is insane. We would never." "Dad, you're confused. Someone must have made a mistake at the pharmacy. We love you." "You love my assets," I said, the word sharp and final. "I heard you, Susan. Asset management. Lily's future. You weren't trying to protect me. You were trying to rob me. And you, Mark." I turned to my son, whose eyes were wide with terror. "You let her. You stood by, and you let her do this to your own father." Mark just shook his head, tears welling in his eyes. "No, Dad," she said. "She said it was for the best. I finished for him. And you believed her, because it was easier than standing up for what was right. It was easier than being a man." I let that hang in the air. The charade was over. The performance was done. All that was left was the raw, ugly truth, laid bare on the coffee table between us. The power in the room hadn't just shifted. It had undergone a tectonic reversal. They had walked in as predators, and now they were nothing but cornered, terrified prey, and the hunt was over. Now, it was time to dictate the terms of their surrender. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. Detective Miller took a small step forward, his presence grounding the entire surreal scene in the cold reality of the law. "Ma'am, sir," he said, his voice devoid of emotion, addressed to Mark and Susan. "My colleague and I will need to ask you a few questions down at the station." Panic, raw and unbridled, finally broke through Susan's composure. Her face, which had been pale, was now blotchy and red. No, this is a misunderstanding. Dad, please. Tell them. We made a mistake. We were just worried about you. We went too far. We were just trying to help you rest. Mark, my son, finally crumbled. He sank onto the sofa, his head in his hands, and began to sob. Deep, racking sobs of a man whose world had just been obliterated. It was a pathetic sight, and for a fleeting moment a flicker of the old paternal instinct stirred in me. The urge to comfort him, to tell him it would be okay. I crushed it. That man, the father who would forgive anything, was gone. He had been poisoned out of existence. My lawyer, Mr. Chen, spoke into the silence. "Detective," he said, "before your clients are taken for questioning, my client has a proposal for them." The detective glanced at me, then at Chen, and gave a slight nod. "You have 5 minutes." Chen turned his bulldog gaze on Mark and Susan. "Here is the situation. The evidence against you is overwhelming. A criminal trial is at this point a certainty. Conviction is highly likely. You are looking at significant prison time. Your reputations will be destroyed. Your professional lives will be over. And Lily, your daughter, will grow up knowing her parents tried to drug and defraud her grandfather." He let that sink in. Susan stopped her pleading and stared at him, her eyes wide with horror. "However," Chen continued, "my client is a man who, despite everything, is thinking of his granddaughter's welfare. He is prepared to offer you a one-time only deal. It is not negotiable." He slid a new set of documents across the table. They weren't from Fields's briefcase. They were from his own. "Mr. Peterson will instruct the district attorney that he does not wish to press charges," Chen said. "He will frame this as a tragic, misguided family matter. The criminal investigation will be closed." A wave of relief washed over Susan's face. She started to speak, but Chen held up a hand. "In exchange," he said, his voice dropping, "you will sign these papers. The first is a legal agreement. You will have no further contact with Ira Peterson for any reason for the rest of his life. You will not call, write, email, or come within 500 feet of his person or this property. Violation of this agreement will result in the immediate reopening of the criminal case." He slid the first paper towards them. "The second document," he went on, "is an instrument creating an irrevocable trust. The sole beneficiary of this trust will be your daughter, Lily Peterson. You will fund this trust with the full and immediate sale of your home, your vehicles, and the liquidation of 80% of your investment and savings accounts. The trust will be managed by an independent trustee, appointed by me. You will have no access to or control over these funds. They will be used for Lily's education and well-being. This is non-negotiable." The color drained from Susan's face again. "Our house? Everything. You were so concerned with asset management," I said, speaking for the first time. "This is just a transfer of assets to ensure Lily's future. Isn't that what you wanted?" My words, a direct echo of her own, hit her like a physical blow. She flinched. "This is everything we have," Mark whispered from behind his hands. "You tried to take everything I have," I replied, my voice flat. "My home, my savings, my freedom, and very nearly my life. This seems like a bargain to me. You get to walk away free. You get to start over. It's more than you deserve." That was the moral choice I was leaving them with, and perhaps leaving myself with. Was it justice, or was it a cold, calculated revenge? I didn't know, and in that moment, I didn't care. It wasn't about revenge, I had told myself. But looking at their shattered faces, I had to admit there was a bitter satisfaction in it that tasted a lot like vengeance. Fields, their lawyer, was now sweating. "My clients need time to consider this. They are under duress. They have until the detective finishes his coffee," Chen said without blinking. "After that, the offer is withdrawn, and he will be escorting them to his car in handcuffs. Your choice." The room was a tableau of ruin. Susan stared at the documents, her sharp, calculating mind clearly running the numbers. weighing the cost of her house against the cost of a prison sentence. Mark was still a puddle of misery. Finally, Susan looked up, her eyes filled with a venomous hatred that was at least honest. "Get the pen," she hissed at Mark. He looked up, his face tear-streaked and confused. "Suze, get the pen, Mark," she shrieked. He fumbled for the pen on the table, and with a shaking hand he signed. Susan snatched it from him, and her signature was a vicious, angry slash across the page. They signed away their home, their savings, their future, and their daughter's inheritance, all to escape the consequences of their own monstrous greed. Chen gathered the documents. "Detective, I believe my client's business here is concluded." Detective Miller nodded. "Mr. and Mrs. Peterson, I trust you'll remember the terms of this agreement." He looked them up and down with open contempt. "Get out of his house." They scrambled to their feet. Susan grabbed her purse, not looking at me, not looking at anyone. Mark wouldn't meet my eye. They scurried out the door like the vermin they were, leaving their lawyer, Mr. Fields, to pack his briefcase in humiliated silence. As the front door closed behind them, a profound quiet fell over the room. My niece Sarah, who had slipped in during the climax, came and put a hand on my shoulder. Leo gave me a slow, approving nod from the fireplace. The weight that had been on my chest for months was gone. The fog had lifted. The war was over. I had won. I was free. And in the quiet emptiness of my living room, surrounded by my true allies, I felt the first stirrings of a new life. And so here I am. It's been 6 months since that day. The house is quiet now, but it's a good quiet. It's the sound of peace, not of menace. The trust for Lily is fully funded and being managed by a professional, a man I trust. She will want for nothing. She'll go to the college of her choice. She'll be able to start her own life without a burden of debt. Her future, the one her parents were so willing to use as a bargaining chip, is secure. That, more than anything, feels like the real victory. I see Lily every other weekend. My niece Sarah brings her. At first it was hard. Mark and Susan had told her I was sick, that I needed to be left alone, that I was angry with them. Children are not fools. Lily knew something was wrong. I sat with her in the garden, on the bench beside Martha's rose bushes, and I told her a simplified version of the truth. I told her that sometimes grown-ups make very bad decisions, and that her mom and dad had made some that meant we couldn't all be together for a while. I told her it had nothing to do with her, and that my love for her was as big and as constant as the sky. She cried and I held her, and we got through it. Now she comes over and we build our Legos, and she tells me about school, and it feels normal. It feels right. As for Mark and Susan, from what I hear, they sold their house at a loss and are renting a small apartment in a town 100 miles away. Mark lost his marketing job once the story, in its vague but ugly outlines, began to circulate. Susan is working as a cashier. They got what they wanted, in a way. They are free. But they are free with nothing. They are ghosts in their own new life, haunted by the wealth and comfort they threw away. Do I feel pity for them? No, I feel nothing for them. They are strangers to me now, characters from a finished book that I have placed back on the shelf. The debate still rages in my mind some nights. Did I go too far? Was stripping them of everything a just punishment, or was it a cruel revenge? Some days I think one thing, some days another. But every morning I wake up in my own bed, in my own house, and I take my real heart medication, and I feel clear. And that clarity is worth more than any moral certainty. So why am I telling you all this? I'm telling you this because there are thousands of people like me out there. People who are being told their own minds are lying to them. People being told that their confusion is just old age, that their fears are just paranoia. I'm here to tell you to trust that instrument that develops over a long life. Trust your gut. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Don't let anyone, not even the people you're supposed to love the most, gaslight you into thinking you are losing your mind. Your instincts are your greatest defense. And find an ally. Find your Leo. It might be a friend, a neighbor, a niece, a lawyer. You cannot fight these battles alone. Pride will tell you to keep it in the family. to not air your dirty laundry. But when the family itself is the source of the rot, you have to look outside it for help. There is no shame in asking for help. The only shame is in suffering in silence. Your life, your savings, your peace of mind, you worked for it. You earned it. Don't let anyone take it from you. Don't let them wrap you in a fog and steal your world out from under you. Fight back. Even if it's just with a quiet phone call, a secret plan, a single solitary act of defiance. Because your clarity is priceless. It's everything. And it's always worth fighting for. Thanks for listening to my story. If you've ever been through something like this, or know someone who has, please share your experience in the comments below. It's by sharing our stories that we realize we're not alone. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories about finding justice when you least expect it.